Hello there, Christy, Ben, Alonso. We're talking about Robin Williams, who died this week, very shockingly, committed suicide this week. And when any celebrity dies, it is a shock, but when it is a suicide, we feel even more helpless and more stunned, especially when it's somebody who is so beloved as Robin Williams.
Well, I mean, if there's been an upshot to this, which is a weird word to use, I would say that there's been a real conversation, I think, about depression, about suicide, about the fact this is a disease like any other one, and that there's a societal stigma about talking about it, but hopefully this kind of public event, brings it into the conversation. There was actually some controversy over the Academy's choice of tweeting out the image from Aladdin and saying, "Genie, you're free," just because that in a weird way seemed to sort of encourage, like, this is how you get rid of the burden of depression,
Right,
and maybe that's not what they were going for. I know.
They meant well with that. They meant to be a poignant
Of course they did. Yes, I give them credit for that. But at the same time, it's kind of like
they're probably not the greatest tweeters at the Academy. It doesn't seem to me.
But also, it's led to a conversation of just how much range he had. And I think when we think about Robin Williams' career, we often think about just the larger-than-life kind of manic, constant association, the ball of energy that he was, and how seamlessly he could go from voices and personalities and historical references and pop culture riffs, and he made it all look effortless. But I think back on movies like 1 Hour Photo.
Sure.
And I like his work in much darker films like that, or in like World's Greatest Dad, the totally underappreciated World's Greatest Dad, or Insomnia. He's the killer in Insomnia, So and to have all that in him, this is the guy who just was Pat Adams too.
I went back and rewatched The World According to Garp. And that's a movie that's about. I'm sorry, where he has to be the sort of calm center of the film. Like, all the nutty stuff is happening around him, and he has to be the stable one. And so for audiences who had only seen him up to that point as Mork, basically, to see him dial it so down and go so internal and be reactive in an actorly way, I think that was the game changer. And his entire career has been this amazing range from Mrs. Doubtfire and his sort of manic in-person shtick to those films you mentioned, a movie called Boulevard that's I think going to be opening later this year that we screened at Outfest this summer, where he plays again a very sort of repressed internal character.
When he goes dark, he goes incredibly subdued, incredibly tight, which is it's so unexpected from that sort of grand personality. I got asked in the few interviews that I did about Robin Williams, two of the interviewers started the question with, he was always, he was in so many great movies, he was always great. And I thought, no, many of those movies were horrible, which Robin Williams was quick to and willing to talk about in a way that other stars aren't.
Sure.
Right.
He made fun of Father's Day and Bicentennial Man in his act, and joked about suicide in his act, about his arguing with his GPS about committing suicide. And he was like, "Have you seen Father's Day and Bicentennial? Have you seen my movies lately?"
Oh man.
But the fact that he was in these bad movies, and somehow he's one of those actors, and there aren't many, who are sort of incredible, intense affection for him.
The stink didn't stay on him.
It just couldn't. It couldn't. He was Robin Williams. He could barge through and come out clean on the other side.
I think where a lot of those movies come from, your Jacks, I think that like Chaplin and Jerry Lewis before him, he had a little bit of a weakness for bathos. He could go into the sticky, sentimental places, and sometimes you didn't necessarily want to follow him there. Same with Jerry Lewis, same with Charlie Chaplin, but you're right. He was so beloved over the course of his career that he could make the occasional misstep and just move on and get to the next thing.
Even if you thought that, you didn't care afterwards. You were like, "Hey, you shouldn't have done that." Anyway, I love Robin Williams.
Exactly.
Right.
You didn't hold it against him.
Yeah,
Totally.
I went back and I looked at the clip of him winning the Oscar for Best Supporting Actor for Good Will Hunting. Did you guys go back and look at that?
No.
So his name is last of all the 5 nominees because he's a W, right? So it's all polite applause for Burt Reynolds and whatever else. And then it's his name, and the whole place just erupts at the very mention of his name among the nominees. And then he wins. And the whole place, they leap to their feet, and it feels like the most genuine outpouring of love for this man, and in a place that's not necessarily a genuine kind of place. And then he sees Billy Crystal. Billy Crystal was hosting that year. here.
Oh, right,
and so he
right.
comes, he accepts it, and he sees Billy Crystal, and just he's still mic'd, and the hug and the oh my god, like the friendship there, it felt so powerful and so real.
You got from the reaction to his death about how well liked this guy was, and stars die all the time, but there's obviously something different about this. Mark Maron's podcast, his WTF, the other WTF podcast, Robin Williams in 2010, is unquestionably worth listening to. It's an incredibly candid and raw conversation, and one of the things, and he talks about suicide in that too, a little bit, tangentially, but it's difficult to listen to given what we know now. But among the things that he says is the sort of the difficulty of when your career dips, because the Academy Award doesn't last. And he ended the talk with Maron, or that part of the talk, by saying that like you win an Academy Award and that lasts like a week, and then people are like, "Hey, Mork," which is funny, but also like it doesn't,
It's true.
like it never doesn't.
Yeah, no.
So and he was definitely bothered by the cancellation of his show from CBS, and his depression started in earnest after his heart attack and his open heart surgery, which I guess there's some evidence that is a thing that happens too, that I didn't know. That was one of the good things that we became aware of. Amazing that he needed money. But that was
apparently his business managers come out and said that's actually not a thing.
No.
well, but he
But I
said
don't
it.
know.
He lived
So-
in Tiburon, which was a really, really nice part of Marin.
No, he had money,
Yeah.
but he owed money from the divorces, and he was trying to sell that big Napa ranch for $30 million. And what he said again was that issue of taking that CBS show was that he's like, look, I can either do these really good indie movies and work basically for scale, or I can go on the road to make money and travel all over and do stand-up, which he could obviously do. He goes, or I can do a TV show, but I need the money. So he had, again, for his lifestyle, maybe he felt like he needed money. I didn't read that from his business manager, but again, it's telling.
No, but he leaves behind, an extraordinary legacy. He was a Juilliard-trained actor. Did Waiting for Godot on Broadway with Steve Martin. You're right, a very mixed bag filmography. But I think Todd Gilchrist said he goes. We may not all agree on which were the bad Robin Williams movies, but we can all agree that he had lots of good ones.
No, that's right.
And there are 4 more movies still to come this year, including the third Night at the Museum movie.
Yeah.
Back as Teddy
And
Roosevelt,
Merry
yeah.
Friggin' Christmas, Boulevard, and something else. Yeah.
Right, so,
And I've never
more to
seen
come.
Death to Smoochie. I got to go
I
back
have.
and see Death to Smoochie.
Maybe I should revisit it possibly.
has its
I think I
champions.
recall it being shrill.
It has one that's come up a lot this week. You're like, oh yeah, that movie, and so I got to get a look.
All right, so Robin Williams was 63.